Tell me which side are you on? Which side are you on? Tell me which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on?
Well, let me ask my 15 Minutes to Fact listeners whether or not they believe that Occupy's puppets are going to be pulling the strings this time. I'm talking about money wars versus the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This coming September 17th in New York City's famous Times Square, Occupy Wall Street and Occupier activist performers will be taking on the infamous Trans-Pacific Partnership in a Star Wars-themed protest called Money Wars. The Trans-Pacific Partnership will be portrayed as the TPP Death Star, a 15-foot replica of a toilet paper roll. Get it? TPP. Well, it just so happens that this falls on Occupy Wall Street's second birthday. Promises to be quite a battle. Some 600 international corporations and their bought and paid for governmental cronies on one side of Times Square against what are presumed to be some 200 costumed activists, videographers, live streamers, citizen journalists, and an untold number of occupiers celebrating their entry into the terrible twos, or should it be the terrific twos. So why the fuss? Who are the Money Wars people? And why that particular theme, and what is their purpose? We have two guests on the phone with us today to provide those answers. First is Elliot Crown, a professional film and stage actor, puppeteer, and writer in New York, and Virginia Simson, a veteran of SDS days, who spent many years on Wall Street as a banking paralegal, and now is probably one of their most annoying gadflies. So welcome to the show today, you two.
Hey, yeah, we're doing okay.
Well, let's start with ladies first. Virginia, you can honestly be termed a veteran of the wars so far as activism goes. So before we go into the role you're going to take in Money Wars, tell us about yourself and how you arrived at this juncture in your life.
Well, I've always been in favor of mass direct action, and what I've learned is the better your art and the more you grab the photo opportunities that are presented to you, the more you get your message across. I believe that popular culture delivers better than writing, a huge booklet that nobody reads.
Well, then my next question would be logical. What's so important about direct action?
Well, it shows that people are willing to put themselves on the line for the issue. People like Medea Benjamin, who've been right out there, right in the forefront, have garnered attention around war crimes that we didn't get any other way because the mainstream media is not really willing to focus on things that are secret. And I think in this case, fighting the TPP, you have to be very, very direct in letting people know that the cat's coming out of the bag. I was one of the first people to write on the North American Union, SPP, op-ed news many years ago, and people thought I was crazy and a conspiracy theorist.
And now it's all showing up, right?
That's right. I hate that phrase, but the chickens are trying to come home to roost to make them the slave masters and us the slaves, and just do away with our courts.
Okay, I got that. That's pretty much what I would hope to get from an activist. But let me ask you my second question, which is actually twofold. First, why and how did you show up at Occupy Wall Street? And then, what do you hope to gain in the street theater that will be involved at Times Square for Occupy's second birthday?
Well, I got involved with Occupy because I saw a chance to build a coalition of people that were working on lots of social justice issues, hopefully to get to the heart of it, which is that the public policy is driven by Wall Street. And the TPP truly exposes that 600 corporations backed by the major banks and our government, which is a revolving door for officials, have all come together with a master plan to just decide all public policy. It's very sad. So I'm hoping that people like me that have been eaten by the banks and people who are 2 paychecks away from poverty and the people who care about social justice will all come together and fight this draconian monster that's been created. You can call it hypocrisy or whatever you want, but it's a corporate grab that we have to stop.
Well, my next question then would be for Elliot Crown. Why don't you provide our listeners with a bit more about your background as well? It seems that your preparation as a professional stage and film actor, you've worked as a circus clown, you even had a stint as a whale watcher guide and a commentator. So in some fashion, you've been well prepared for your Money Wars work. So give us a few words on this.
Well, it's good preparation to spend. I've done about 10 years on boats, and you spend hours particularly on Whale Watch, is just talking to, people from all over the country. And I guess, in a way that sort of gave me a sense of what people can perceive and how they learn, because it was a teaching experience. And there's a parameter, to communicate with Americans, you kind of have to stay within a sort of a conscribed way of presentation. So it was good that way. Clowning has always been my favorite thing. I was a circus clown and class clown, and that's sort of my favorite kind of expression. So mixing sort of the understanding of getting memes across with sort of pure expression is really what I love to do.
Well, not a lot of people are versed in making political theater, and of course we know from classic plays and Shakespeare that the clown was always the person who told the truth, and that's the only person that the king would listen to. So in this world where we have the king involved being everybody in the 99% that would be watching the action unfold at Union Square, this political theater, in other words, what is the process involved and what are the challenges?
Well, it's kind of a reverse process when you're making political theater, because you sort of start at the end. You want to make a point, you want to teach a message. So you start from that point of view, and then you think backwards, well, what's the best vehicle to tell that story? What's the best way to capture that in images that are familiar to people? People will recognize.
Well, you do that in large part by using some very, very large puppets, not ones that are necessarily held by strings, but posted up on large poles. How did that concept come about, and what is your role in that?
Well, it's funny. I think there's something called bigism. People like big houses, big diamonds, big cars, and big puppets, And, well, the puppet is magical. It brings the inanimate to life. So it's kind of a magic, and people are drawn to it and fascinated by it just on the surface, which helps you grab people.
Well, it should be obvious to the listeners of 50 Minutes of Fact, where people come to be able to hear the things that they can't hear anyplace else, at least not unfiltered, that mainstream media does not assign reporters to Occupy events or to almost any active event for that matter. So this is partly made up for by citizen journalists, photographers, bloggers like myself and others, but you believe that the performing arts have an equally valuable role to play. So tell us why.
Well, live theater, is people experiencing together and breathing together, and there's a natural community that's instantly formed in that moment. And theater gives you the option to show a world that doesn't exist, to posit a better world. It also, through humor, and I think humor is essential in all of what I do. I want it to be entertaining just off the bat. You may not speak a word of English, and you'll still go, wow, that was fun. I want it to communicate across culture, and across ages, and I think humor is that tool. And once people are entertained and listening, then you can teach them and lead them on somewhere. But you've got to grab people against the background of an incredibly inundated, consumerist, over-messaged society where people are working unbelievable hours and stressed and struggling to keep afloat now. So you have to grab people and with a positive message.
Well, I noticed that Occupy and you folks have chosen TPP to rail against or rally against. That poses some interesting questions. You're using this term Star Wars. What is the relationship or the vis-a-vis comparing Star Wars and that historical fictional account to what's really happening in our world today?
Well, it's a great, sort of a shooting point, a surfing point off of Star Wars, because it's beloved, and it's beloved globally, and it's understood and recognized. The characters are familiar. So we knew that if we took sort of a parody of that, we'd have an audience built in, and our characters remind you of the originals. We have Darth Banker, and Emperor Pipeline, Princess Laid Off, Luke Whistleblower, and the Money Troopers, which have appeared and been, widely loved. They're very scary sort of money masks. So it was just a way to cut through the need to build a universe and to sort of inhabit a pre-built one, so we could get to our messaging.
Interesting. Well, obviously, in any venture that is that close to Broadway, and you're trying to get an audience, and you're basically the producers, there's got to be a challenge in that called funding. How are you funding this, not only today and for the birthday on S-17, September 17th, but into the future?
Right now we're operating primarily on fumes, but we're wondering if we can recycle some of the methane leaking from the fracked wells in Pennsylvania to power this enterprise. We're on a shoestring. We're on a thread. But it's usually that way when you're making this kind of theater. We're hoping we can maybe build a collective and continue doing this kind of work. But it is not corporate funded.
Well, it's a great lead-in for me to unabashedly ask my listeners to respond to that need and to chip in and help fund this event. Now, there's a Kickstarter link on the WGRNradio.com 15 Minutes of Fact introductory page to this interview. So I'm going to ask my listeners to please click on that link and follow to a more detailed explanation, along with a great video appeal that you put together. So let me complete the show, the 15 Minutes of Fact today, by bringing Virginia back on. Virginia, are there any last thoughts that you might want to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, please get familiar with the TPP. I like to think 7 generations ahead, and this is a gift we don't want to give our children. And if you put it in there, there's a great Dennis Trainer video. There's a lot of links for trade justice. And, go to our Kickstarter page because we're trying to give you a little education there, too, that what we're fighting is really anti-people, and it's all driven by profit.
Well, Elliot and Virginia, I want to thank you both on behalf of our 15 Minutes of Fact listeners and fans for sharing your story with us, alerting us not only to a great birthday party coming up for Occupy, but the special way in which you and your team have planned to celebrate it. Now, for the listeners, you can reach Elliot and Virginia by way of their website, so please go there when you're donating some funds to this worthwhile cause. Make sure that you connect with them by email as well. Do you guys want to share an email address or another way of contacting you?
Well, we have Money Wars with a Z, 2013 at Gmail, which we took, and I've just started a paper called Hell No TPP Update, which you can get off Paperly Papers, so you'll get an update every day about what's going on, because August 24th, they have their big meeting in Canada. People should be very aware, because a lot of the transparency is going to fall down.
Oh, there is no transparency. I think we both know that.
Yeah.
But let's rip it away from them. And this is Jerry Ashton, 15 Minutes of Fact here on WGRN Radio.
Jerry?
Yeah, thanks, Jerry.
We like direct action.
Well, you don't have to thank me for doing what I love to do. But I will thank our listeners for stopping by to learn more about social change movements, the dedicated and heroic people involved, as exampled by Elliot and Virginia. Be sure to search me out where I blog at the Huffington Post and follow me as well on Twitter as @WrittenOffUSA.
Tell me which